Imagine American television without the presence of MASH. Hard to believe, right? The show didn't just become a television phenomenon, it completely redefined what a sitcom could be. Premiering in 1972 during the final stages of the Vietnam War, MASH was set during the Korean War, skillfully blending humor and pain. The quirky characters helped viewers explore the absurdities of war, as well as the healing power of the human spirit. The show quickly captured the hearts of its fans. However, behind the scenes, MASH was constantly evolving. As the content delved deeper into social commentary and portrayed more complex characters, the tension between them began to grow. Some of the show's most famous stars eventually made the difficult decision to leave. Did they leave for personal reasons, career changes, or creative differences? The reasons behind their departures may surprise you. Let's dive into the story behind these decisions. The story of MASH holds many fascinating layers yet to be uncovered. But before diving into the finer details, let us turn back the clock and explore the origins of this legendary series. Like many other successful television shows, MASH did not begin on the small screen, but rather with a book. In 1968, Dr. Richard Hooker, the pen name of Korean war surgeon H. Richard Hornberger, published the novel MASH, a novel about 3 army doctors. The book recounted his experiences as a surgeon in a mobile army hospital during the Korean War. With its mix of dark humor, human warmth, and the harsh realities of war, the novel became a bestseller and quickly caught the attention of Hollywood. Two years later, director Robert Altman adapted the novel into the film MASH, a dark, satirical comedy that was both irreverent and deeply serious. The film starred Donald Sutherland as Hawkeye Pierce and Elliot Gould as Trapper John. It left a strong impression on audiences, especially at a time when the Vietnam War was still a very present reality in the minds of Americans. The film became a major success, both commercially and critically, winning the Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival and the Academy Award for Best Adapted Screenplay. However, the true cultural breakthrough of MASH came 2 years later when CBS decided to adapt the concept into a weekly television series. Developed by Larry Gelbart and Gene Reynolds, the television version of MASH premiered on September 17, 1972. MASH retained its wartime setting and quirky humor, but brought a new tone to the screen. With more episodes and greater focus on character development, the show opened the door to emotionally rich storytelling. Alan Alda, in the role of Hawkeye Pierce, quickly became the heart of the series. Although the first season struggled with ratings and came close to cancellation, CBS decided to take a risk and moved the show to Saturday nights. This decision triggered a dramatic increase in the show's viewership, causing ratings to soar to unprecedented levels. Beyond just numbers, the cultural influence of the program expanded significantly, reaching a wide and diverse audience. MASH emerged as a pioneering series that boldly challenged and broke numerous established conventions within the television industry. It stood out as the very first show of its kind in Hollywood, daring to experiment with a completely new format that blended comedy with the harsh realities of war. The program incorporated authentic war footage, adding a layer of realism rarely seen in television at the time. Moreover, it became one of the earliest American comedy series to replace the traditional laugh track with the sound of helicopters, creating a unique and immersive atmosphere that deepened the viewer's experience. Alan Alda, in addition to playing the role of Hawkeye, also became a director, writer, and creative force behind the show, contributing significantly to its realism and emotional depth. However, as MASH matured, the characters evolved as well, and not all cast members agreed with this transformation. Some felt their roles were being diminished or turned into caricatures, while others faced personal challenges or felt compelled to explore other creative paths. Over the course of 11 seasons, MASH went through many cast changes, but the show remained committed to a single mission, portraying the cost of war through the lens of compassion, wit, and the unbreakable bonds between people. In this context, we cannot fail to mention the unexpected departure of McLean Stevenson, an actor intertwined with MASH from its earliest days. If you ask longtime fans of MASH which moment broke their hearts the most, they would very likely point to the final scene of the third season finale, Abyssinia Henry. A short but haunting line delivered quietly by Radar Lieutenant Colonel Henry Blake's plane was shot down over the Sea of Japan. There were no survivors. This moment not only shocked the audience, but also marked the first major departure of a key character in MASH McLean Stevenson. But the story of McLean's departure doesn't end there. He had been an integral part of MASH from the beginning, and his exit sent a major shockwave through the fan base and the show's writers alike. As the lovable but often befuddled commanding officer of the 4077th, the character of Colonel Henry Blake, played by McLean Stevenson, was a perfect foil to the madness of war. While Hawkeye and Trapper brought rebellion and wit, Henry Blake represented a humanity that was sometimes confused, sometimes rudderless, but always well-intentioned. In the early seasons, McLean's performance was widely praised, and he even won a Golden Globe for his humor and relatability. Fans adored him. However, behind the scenes, things were not entirely harmonious. According to interviews and memoirs from the cast and writers, McLean gradually grew frustrated with his role. Although the show began as an ensemble comedy, it quickly shifted its focus to Alan Alda's character, Hawkeye Pierce. As Alda became more deeply involved in the writing and directing, his character received strong emotional development and storylines. Meanwhile, McLean felt he was being marginalized. This feeling of being sidelined became so pronounced that McLean told People magazine in 1975, "I wanted to be number one. I wanted to be the one to carry the show." While this might seem egotistical, in reality, it wasn't simply a matter of McLean's ego. He had grand dreams of stardom and huge ambitions. He believed he had the capability and charisma to lead his own show. With these ambitions, McLean felt he was being pigeonholed into a role he no longer wanted to be associated with. He had recognized the power of television and believed he was talented enough not just to be second or third fiddle in a show, but to be number one. Therefore, at the end of the third season, McLean approached the producers and announced that he would not be returning. Typically, when an actor leaves a sitcom, their character is written off gently, perhaps they get transferred, or even leave to get married. However, MASH was not a traditional sitcom. The creators, Larry Gelbart and Gene Reynolds, saw an opportunity to do something bold. They wanted to remind the audience that MASH was not just a story of humor, but also a story about war. And in war, not everyone gets to go home. This is where the opportunity to make that point arose. The legendary episode Abyssinia Henry was the turning point. In this episode, Colonel Henry Blake receives his honorable discharge and prepares to return home. But what the audience never expected was the shocking conclusion. McLean Stevenson's character, Colonel Henry Blake, didn't just leave. He met a tragic end. The episode Abyssinia Henry concludes with a celebration, tears, hugs, and joyful goodbyes, creating the feeling of a happy ending. But when the final scene arrived, it hit like a devastating storm. Radar enters the operating room, cap in hand, his face grim. As the surgeons operate, he announces flatly, Lieutenant Colonel Henry Blake's plane was shot down over the Sea of Japan. There were no survivors. This scene changed television history. There was no music, no laugh track or helicopter sounds, only a heavy silence, the beeping of medical equipment, and stunned faces. It was the first time a beloved comedy character had been killed off so unexpectedly without warning. The cast's reaction was so authentic because only a few people knew the ending in advance. Alan Alda later revealed that only Gary Berghoff, who played Radar, was told beforehand to prepare, while the other actors' reactions in the final take were completely genuine. As soon as the episode aired, the audience reaction was immediate and intense. CBS received thousands of letters, some praising the show's honesty, while others expressed anger that their favorite character was so abruptly taken away. Some even felt the producers had gone too far. However, MASH creator Larry Gelbart defended the decision, stating, "We wanted to make the point that not everyone gets to come home." And that's exactly what they did. After the unexpected departure of Colonel Henry Blake, what happened to McLean Stevenson? Let's just say, things didn't go as he had imagined. Initially, everything seemed wonderful. McLean signed a lucrative contract with NBC and launched his own career. He went on to star in The McLean Stevenson Show, a family sitcom built around his amiable charm. It seemed McLean had set his own terms and was making a name for himself in the entertainment industry, but his success was short-lived. His show was canceled after just one season, and his second attempt with Hello Larry fared even worse. Despite being heavily promoted, the show was critically panned and later became a running joke. In hindsight, McLean regretted his decision to leave MASH. In a 1983 interview with the Los Angeles Times, he admitted, "I took myself out of the game." Not only did his new shows fail, but McLean also realized that MASH was a once-in-a-lifetime experience. The cast, the writing, and the impact the show had were all lightning in a bottle. Some of his co-stars like Alan Alda and Loretta Swit expressed sadness that he left, but they also understood his desire to branch out. However, some privately wondered if McLean had been too hasty in giving up something so special. Despite regretting his decision to leave, McLean Stevenson continued to work in television, making occasional guest appearances on other shows. However, he never again found the level of success or the emotional connection with audiences that he had as Colonel Henry Blake in MASH. When McLean passed away in 1996 at the age of 68, tributes poured in from fans and colleagues. Alan Alda remembered him as a wonderful actor and a good man, while Gary Berghoff, who played Radar, called him a joyous spirit who brought happiness to everyone around him. Whatever one might say about McLean, in a way, his departure gave the show its soul. And that is the irony. Although he left in search of a major career breakthrough, the role he abandoned became the most enduring of his career. If McLean's departure was an emotional and public moment, Wayne Rogers' exit from MASH was entirely different, quiet, complicated, and full of behind-the-scenes drama. Wayne Rogers, who played Trapper John McIntyre, one half of the comedic duo that defined the show's early seasons, simply vanished. One episode he was there, and the next he was gone. No goodbye, no explanation, and certainly no clear-cut ending. So why did this happen? To understand, we need to go back to the beginning. Wayne Rogers as Trapper. John McIntyre was a key part of the original comedic duo alongside Alan Alda's Hawkeye Pierce. The chemistry between the pair was electric, and audiences loved their combination of witty banter, mischief, and unshakable friendship, like a wartime version of The Odd Couple. However, behind the laughter, tensions were simmering. Wayne had signed on to MASH under the impression that the show would be a true ensemble with equal screen time for the main cast. But as the series progressed, the focus began to shift heavily towards Alda's character, Hawkeye. It became clear that Hawkeye was no longer just a co-lead. He was now the show's moral and emotional center. And as Alda, also a writer and director, began to contribute more to the show's creative direction, things started to change. Initially, Wayne wasn't bothered by Alda's success, but gradually a sense of dissatisfaction and frustration began to set in as he realized he was no longer a central figure in the story. Although Wayne Rogers and Alan Alda were reportedly close in real life, Wayne felt he was being sidelined from the very beginning. Alda's character seemed to be the only one given the chance to grow, while the rest of the characters remained stuck in their original roles. In reality, Trapper John had gradually transitioned from a lead to a sidekick. As Wayne later explained in interviews, the issue wasn't one of ego, but of storytelling integrity. He once said, "There wasn't much for Trapper to do anymore. He was one of two guys, and then he became the guy who nodded at everything Alan said." But unlike McClane, who left openly and was given a farewell, Wayne chose a different path. He decided to leave quietly without any fanfare, without prior notice, and refused to renew his contract after the third season. The producers didn't even know about his decision until just before the fourth season was set to begin. This made the situation even more unusual. Wayne's contract with the show had never been formally signed, meaning he had been working on a handshake agreement from the start. When the producers threatened to sue him for breach of contract, they had no legal standing because he hadn't broken any agreement. He simply walked away from a show where he no longer believed his character had a chance to develop. The sudden passing of Wayne caused the writers to scramble and make significant changes to the script. They had to rewrite the opening of Season 4, explaining that Trapper John had been discharged from the hospital while Hawkeye was on leave. The audience's reaction was incredibly strong. First it was Henry Blake, and now it was Trapper. Could this really be happening? Worse still, there was no farewell scene for Trapper. There was no party at the hospital, and most importantly, no heartfelt goodbye. Fans were left in shock, struggling to process the abrupt departure of a beloved character without the closure they had come to expect. As the producers scrambled to address the situation, Mike Farrell was brought in to replace Wayne as B.J. Honeycutt. BJ was a character designed to be more grounded, emotionally complex, and less rebellious than Trapper. This change not only affected the character dynamics, but also shifted the tone of the show. Gone was the sharp humor of the Trapper-Hawkeye duo, replaced by a gentler, more introspective version of MASH. The focus began to shift towards exploring deeper relationships and more nuanced emotional connections between the characters, moving away from the more overtly comedic moments. This change marked a significant turning point in the tone and direction of MASH. Fans had to adjust to a new version of the show, one that was no longer just about the laughs, but about the deeper, more thoughtful exploration of human nature. This shift brought a new layer of depth to the series, one that delved into complex relationships and the emotional struggles of the characters. While not everyone was immediately on board with the change, it ultimately transformed MASH into a show that was not only about comedy, but also about poignant reflections on life and humanity, solidifying its place as a beloved, lasting cultural icon. This change is truly ironic. MASH actually became more profound and arguably better in the absence of Trapper. While many still prefer the earlier seasons with the comedic duo of Trapper and Hawkeye, we feel that this change was a step in the right direction. By replacing Trapper with BJ, the show didn't just shift its storytelling approach, but also opened up an emotional depth that had previously been underexplored. This transformation made MASH not just a humorous show, but one that was rich with lessons about friendship, loss, and humanity. Although the change was initially shocking, it turned out to be the key factor that helped the show evolve and thrive in the following seasons. As for Wayne, although he no longer appeared in the spotlight, he continued his career and achieved great things in other fields. After leaving MASH, Wayne appeared in several television shows and films, but ultimately, he chose a completely different path, becoming a successful financial investor and commentator. Wayne was truly a very intelligent person, and this shift in his career not only demonstrated his acting talent, but also showcased his ability to go beyond the boundaries of the entertainment industry. This career change highlights that he didn't just stop at acting, but also had significant ambitions and abilities in other areas. Wayne Rogers was more than just a beloved television star. He was also a highly intelligent investor with a keen understanding of the financial world. Before pursuing a career in acting, Rogers studied history at Princeton, which laid the foundation for his later success in business. He didn't just rely on his acting career to achieve financial success. He also ventured into Wall Street, where he applied his analytical skills to make sound investments. His deep understanding of economics and financial trends allowed him to thrive in a different arena, demonstrating his versatility and business acumen. In the 1990s, Wayne became a regular contributor to the Cashin' In program on Fox News, where he offered insights on economics and policy. His appearances on the show were a reflection of his expertise in the field of finance. While many may have known him for his roles in television shows, it was his strategic investments that earned him millions of dollars. His success in the financial world, separate from his acting career, proved that Wayne Rogers was not just a talented actor, but also a businessman with a sharp mind for smart, lucrative opportunities. Although Wayne decided to leave Hollywood, he did not completely step away from the entertainment industry. He continued to appear in a few television shows, taking on recurring roles, and occasionally shared humorous stories about his time on MASH in later interviews. Despite his sudden decision to leave, there was no sign of any long-lasting discord between Wayne and the rest of the cast. Alan Alda, his close friend and co-star, once said, "Wayne was one of the smartest people I ever worked with. I really miss him when he left." Their friendship was not limited to their time on set, but remained strong throughout their lives. Even after both had ventured onto different paths, Wayne and Alan Alda continued to share a close bond, and the respect they had for each other was a lasting part of their memories of MASH. When Wayne passed away in 2015 at the age of 82, Alda tweeted, "He was smart, funny, curious, and dedicated. We had a pact to keep challenging each other for the rest of our lives, and I'm sorry we won't have that chance." Despite leaving MASH at the height of his fame, Wayne is still remembered by fans for his mischievous smile and the approachable charm he brought to his portrayal of Trapper John. His legacy as a beloved character continues to resonate with audiences, serving as a testament to the lasting impact he left both on and off the screen. We've talked about actors who left to pursue different paths, but what about those who left because they found the series emotionally too challenging? Gary Berghoff, who played Radar O'Reilly, is one such special case. In contrast to the strong and vibrant image of some other characters, Gary quietly left MASH, and the reasons behind his departure were more complex than many might think. While MASH was a legendary show, the emotional burden it carried, especially the blend of humor and sadness, became increasingly difficult for Gary. His decision to leave stemmed from the personal impact the show had on him, an aspect that is often overlooked in the entertainment industry. For fans, Gary was Radar, the big-eyed company clerk, with an uncanny intuition, always carrying a teddy bear under one arm and the weight of war under the other. Radar, with his sweet innocence and childlike demeanor, was the soul of MASH. He helped soften the harshness of the battlefield by offering warmth and sincerity amidst the bloody and tragic scenes. While other characters like Hawkeye and Trapper constantly broke the rules and challenged conventions, or Henry Blake fumbled in his leadership role, Radar was the one who maintained the emotional connection, serving as a steady support for those around him. He was the heartbeat of the 4077th, a symbol of subtlety and authenticity, a spirit that brought balance to an environment filled with chaos. Radar was not just a simple character, he was truly the bright spot in every situation. His innocence created a unique emotional space throughout the series, not only expressed through his endearing lines, but also through the small, thoughtful actions he took to care for his comrades. Radar's absence in the later seasons left a huge void, and fans continued to reminisce about the days when Radar was an irreplaceable part of MASH. His combination of affection and innocence helped elevate the show, turning it into more than just a war comedy. It became a work that reflected profound human values and emotions. If you also feel that Radar was an irreplaceable part of MASH, be sure to share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss out on more fascinating stories about the legendary characters of MASH. However, behind Radar's gentle voice and anxious smile, there was an actor slowly breaking under the weight of the role. Gary was the only actor to return from the 1970 MASH film, and in doing so he brought an emotional depth to Radar that the film version lacked. On television, Gary transformed Radar into an irreplaceable symbol of the lost innocence of wartime. Radar was not just a humorous character, he also embodied the hardships and losses brought by war, and he maintained the emotional connection between the characters. However, by season 7, cracks began to appear. Gary was not only struggling with his work, but also facing personal issues. The grueling production schedule of MASH, combined with his perfectionist nature, left him exhausted. He felt immense pressure and fatigue, which ultimately led to his decision to leave the show. Gary felt that the role of Radar had become a burden too heavy to bear, as his emotions and spirit were drained and stretched thin with each season of filming. The perfectionism and the demanding nature of a high-profile show like MASH made Gary feel that he could no longer maintain the character in the way he wanted. He was not only facing professional demands, but also grappling with personal issues that were difficult to share with his colleagues. Leaving the show was a tough decision, but one that was necessary to protect his health and well-being. Gary's departure from MASH wasn't simply due to exhaustion. It was a feeling of needing to find himself again, realizing that he no longer had the strength to continue in a job that he felt was slowly taking away the joy and creativity he once had. Gary Berghoff, who played Radar O'Reilly, struggled for a long time with anxiety and depression, an issue that was rarely reported on at the time, but deeply affected his ability to cope with the demanding requirements of filming. On top of that was the pain of being away from his family. In the late 1970s, Gary got married and had a young daughter. However, the long hours on set forced him to be away from home constantly. Later, Gary admitted that missing the early years of his daughter's life was a mistake that I will never stop regretting. In a 2018 interview, Gary's co-star, Mike Farrell, reflected on the emotional challenges that Gary faced during his time on MASH. He shared Gary had emotional struggles. He always felt like he wasn't getting the attention or appreciation he deserved, but I think he underestimated how much we respected him. Gary's feelings of being overlooked despite his integral role on the show weighed heavily on him. While his character was beloved by audiences, it seemed that Gary's internal battles made it difficult for him to feel valued in the same way. The recognition he received for his portrayal of Radar didn't always match what he needed emotionally, and this contributed to the difficulties he faced while working on the show. In addition to the emotional challenges, Gary also encountered contract disputes, which added to the tension he was already experiencing. He sought a higher salary, more flexibility in his schedule, and less screen time to allow for a better work-life balance. Gary wanted more control over his time, particularly in order to focus on his personal life. The demanding nature of MASH, coupled with his desire for more freedom, created a conflict that he struggled with. These issues, combined with the emotional toll, ultimately played a role in his decision to leave the series, as he needed to prioritize his well-being and find a way to regain some balance in his life. The producers, fully aware that Radar was a central character on the show, made every effort to support Gary as much as possible. At times, Gary was even given more time off and appeared less frequently in each season. However, these efforts were still not enough to satisfy him. Emotionally, Gary was exhausted. By season 8, he made the difficult decision to leave MASH for good. Unlike Wayne Rogers, the show didn't let Gary leave quietly this time. Radar was given a 2-part farewell episode titled Goodbye Radar, which is considered one of the most heartbreaking storylines in the series. In this episode, Radar returns from a vacation and discovers that the 47th is slowly falling apart during his absence. At first, he tries to fix everything just like he always does, but in the end, Radar realizes that it's time to move on. His mother needs him back home, his family farm is in trouble, and perhaps Radar has finally grown up. The final scene of the episode is almost silent, with only Radar walking alone in the fading light of the Korean sky his teddy bear left behind on Hawkeye's bed. That moment was both emotional and poignant, and it conveyed everything the show could not express in words. The audience felt the loss, as seeing him leave felt like saying goodbye to our own innocence. After leaving MASH, Gary took a long break from acting, seeking peace and change in his life. He didn't continue to pursue an acting career, but chose instead a simpler, more private life. Gary's departure from MASH wasn't just the end of a role, it marked the conclusion of a beautiful emotional chapter, a part of the memories the show had given to its viewers. After leaving MASH, Gary Berghoff made only a few appearances, one of which was in a short, low-budget film titled Walter, where Radar became a rookie police officer. However, the film was not a success. Despite this, Gary decided to step away from Hollywood entirely, opting to focus his energy on other pursuits. He turned his attention to painting, wildlife conservation, and even invention. Yes, you heard that right, Gary became an inventor. He holds several patents, including one for a fishing tackle system, showcasing his diverse interests beyond acting. Gary's decision to leave the entertainment industry was a conscious one, as he sought a quieter, more fulfilling life away from the spotlight. His new ventures allowed him to explore his creativity in different ways, and his involvement in conservation reflects his deep concern for the environment. The success of his inventions, including the fishing tackle system, demonstrated his ability to apply his problem-solving skills in fields outside of acting. Gary found a new sense of purpose in these activities, showing that his talents extended far beyond his iconic role as Radar. Gary's love for nature became his sanctuary, a way for him to heal from the pressures of fame and the emotional toll that MASH had taken on him. Gary explained that he left for two reasons: family and exhaustion. "I wanted to pick up the pieces of my life," and who could blame him? Today, Gary lives a quiet life, far away from the spotlight. He doesn't engage in many interviews and doesn't chase after attention, choosing instead to focus on his personal well-being and passions. This peaceful retreat into nature and away from the public eye allowed him to reclaim a sense of balance and happiness that had been lost during his years on the show. However, every now and then fans still spot Gary at conventions or come across a rare quote from him, and they are reminded of Radar, the soft-hearted boy with big ears who could hear the helicopters before anyone else, Larry Linville, and the departure of Major Frank Burns. It's hard to imagine the early seasons of MASH without Major Frank Burns, a rigid, petty character who always considered himself important, perfectly portrayed by Larry Linville. Frank Burns was a character that audiences both loved and hated. His secret relationship with Major Houlihan, his obsession with rules, and his deep insecurities made him the perfect comedic villain for Hawkeye and Trapper. However, as the show progressed, Frank's one-dimensional villainous personality began to show, and not in a good way. While the other characters grew increasingly more complex, Frank remained stuck in a loop. His insecurities never developed, and his prejudices were never challenged. Larry Linville, an actor with a much broader range than what he was being allowed to showcase, began to feel the strain. By the end of Season 5, Larry made a bold move. He decided not to renew his contract. According to him, he had taken the character as far as he could. Larry was not fired and certainly not pressured to leave. He simply chose to walk away, realizing that MASH was evolving beyond the limits of Frank Burns. His departure created a significant ripple effect. With Frank gone, the show was free to explore more complex moral conflicts, allowing the characters and storyline to evolve in new directions. No longer needing a cartoonish villain, the humor now came from irony and humanity rather than cruelty. In many ways, we can see Larry Linville's departure as a creative turning point, helping MASH rise from good to legendary. However, that doesn't mean fans didn't feel the loss. During the first 5 seasons, Frank was an essential part of the show's humor and tension. His presence played a crucial role in balancing the more rebellious characters like Hawkeye and Trapper with his rigid, rule-abiding nature. Although within the storyline of the show, Frank's absence was not mourned, his disappearance created a profound shift that the audience could clearly feel in the essence of the show. Frank had been an essential part of the tension, conflict, and humor of MASH with his rigid and petty personality, providing the perfect foil for characters like Hawkeye and Trapper. However, when he left, it opened the door for the show to evolve in a new direction, where the emotional complexity of the characters and storylines could develop more deeply. Without Frank, MASH was able to explore more depth and diversity in its stories, no longer confined to the simple hero-villain dynamic. This change not only altered the tone of the show, but also created opportunities for character growth, marking a turning point that allowed the show to become more profound and emotionally rich in the seasons that followed. Frank's departure marked a significant turning point in the tone and direction of the show, helping it move forward, going beyond simple conflicts to explore more complex themes. After leaving MASH, Larry Linville continued to take on guest roles in TV shows and films, but he never found a role as prominent or unforgettable as Major Frank Burns. Even though he worked on other projects, the role of Frank remained a lasting imprint, and his absence left a significant void in the show. Not only was Frank Burns written out of MASH, but another character was introduced to replace him, leaving just as profound an impact: Charles Emerson Winchester III, played by David Ogden Stiers. Introduced in Season 6, Winchester was a stark contrast to Frank. He was a highly educated, intelligent, and arrogant surgeon with a personality that was far more reserved and secretive. Unlike Frank, who often became the focus of tension and conflict, Winchester's quiet confidence and disregard for the norms of the camp provided a new challenge for the team. Not just a simple antagonist, Winchester truly presented a challenge to Hawkeye BJ and even the tone of the show. With Winchester's arrival, the series didn't just maintain its humor and character-driven tension, but also added layers of emotional complexity and new dynamics among the characters, providing fresh challenges for the 4077 personnel. David Ogden Stiers portrayed this character with remarkable restraint. Initially, Winchester appeared arrogant and irritating, a character difficult to integrate who created tension with those around him. However, over time, cracks began to appear in his character. Winchester was not heartless or cold. He was simply cautious, always keeping his distance from others, especially in the harsh environment of war. And he certainly wasn't cruel, perhaps just a bit proud with an overconfidence in his abilities. Beneath his cold exterior and wine-laden conversations was a man calculating, constantly grappling with the brutal reality of war and the wounds that each patient brought with them. Winchester was a complex antagonist with deep internal conflicts, making him an essential part of MASH's development. Unlike previous actors, David Ogden Stiers did not leave MASH midway through its run. He stayed until the very last episode, not in protest, but to end his journey on a note of poetry. His final scene, teaching a Chinese prisoner of war to play Mozart, became not just a touching moment, but one of the most hauntingly beautiful scenes in television history. This was not just a special scene, but also a manifestation of Winchester's strength, not to be loved, but to remind us that war can break everyone, even those who seem too refined to be affected. This scene, with its gentle tone and deep humanity, helped Winchester evolve from a mere antagonist into a reflection of the complexity and internal conflicts that war brings. The end of his character was not only the closure of a storyline, but also a powerful message about the nature of war, that it doesn't only impact the vulnerable, but also those who seem untouchable. David Ogden Stiers brought depth and subtlety to the character of Winchester that few could achieve, and his final scene remains one of the most beautiful and meaningful moments MASH has left with its audience. When given the opportunity to join the After MASH series, David declined, explaining that Winchester's story had already been completed. Winchester said everything he needed to say. He shared. After his successful career in MASH, David went on to voice characters for Disney, a job he dedicated himself to for many years. His decision to turn down After MASH wasn't because David wasn't fond of the character of Winchester, but because he felt that the character's journey had come to a natural conclusion. He didn't want to prolong his story unnecessarily, and instead chose new projects where he could explore and showcase his acting abilities in different ways. In 2009, in an interview with the website Gossip Boy, David openly discussed his sexual orientation, sharing, "I am gay. I'm very proud of it. He explained that he hadn't come out earlier in his career because he feared it might affect his job opportunities, especially while working as a voice actor for Disney and participating in television and film projects. At the time, there was concern that coming out could lead to actors losing roles or being pushed out of the industry, which kept many people from publicly acknowledging their sexual orientation. However, David decided to live authentically and expressed pride in who he was, despite the professional challenges he might face. Although he kept his personal life private for most of his career, David was deeply respected in the industry, not only for his dignity, but also for the extraordinary range of his acting. He left an indelible mark through his performances, particularly his portrayal of Charles Emerson Winchester III in MASH. David passed away in 2018 at the age of 75 from bladder cancer. However, his legacy endures not only through his exceptional performances, but also through his courage to live authentically despite the challenges and obstacles in his career. His ability to maintain his integrity and self-respect has inspired many generations of actors and fans, and his role in the entertainment industry remains a lasting memory. While MASH is known for its humorous male characters, we cannot overlook the pivotal role that female characters played in shaping the tone of the show. One of the most important female characters was Major Margaret "Hot Lips" Houlihan, portrayed by Loretta Swit. Margaret was not only a strong and decisive character, but also brought significant emotional depth to the show. She was a resilient military officer, constantly fighting for fairness and responsibility in the harsh environment of war. However, Margaret wasn't just a symbol of strength. She also displayed complex emotions, from loneliness to intense feelings toward other characters, particularly in her relationships with Major Frank Burns, and later with her male colleagues like Hawkeye and Trapper. Loretta Swit's portrayal of Margaret created a character who was not only influential, but also essential to the success of MASH. In a war zone filled with men telling jokes to dispel the darkness, the women in MASH faced a much more difficult task: how to be seen. While the male characters could easily dominate the space, standing out with their humor, jokes, and mental battles, the female characters, especially Margaret "Hot Lips" Houlihan, had to work tirelessly to prove themselves. Not only did Margaret have to face the brutal challenges of war, but she also had to overcome gender biases in an environment dominated by men. In order to be recognized, Margaret had to prove her exceptional abilities, not only through her toughness, but also through her perseverance and resilience in her work. No one among the female characters faced a steeper climb or a more notable transformation than Margaret. When she was first introduced, she was a tough and strict military officer, someone who was strong-willed and decisive, but also vulnerable when dealing with loneliness and inner conflict. Her relationships with male characters like Frank Burns' Hawkeye and Trapper created not only tension but also gradually evolved into more complex interactions, highlighting the changes in Margaret's character. She was no longer just a hard-nosed woman. She became a deeply nuanced character, strong yet humane, reflecting the complexity and struggles a woman faces in a wartime world full of injustice and discrimination. While she was a talented and resilient military officer, Margaret didn't always receive the respect she truly deserved. She had to fight not only to prove her capabilities, but also to establish her place as a woman in a harsh wartime setting where her strength was sometimes misunderstood and misjudged. Her relationships with male characters, especially Hawkeye and Trapper, created tension, but also highlighted her growth as a character with depth and complexity. When MASH began, the character of Margaret Houlihan was written as a joke. Her nickname, Hot Lips, said it all, referencing a gag from the original film. She was strict bookish and frequently the target of ridicule. However, Loretta Swit, who portrayed Margaret, refused to let her character be confined to that box. With each season, Loretta brought intelligence, strength, and vulnerability to Margaret, creating a complex and multidimensional character. By the end of the series, Margaret was not only respected, but had become a strong, complex, and revolutionary character in a very subtle way. Loretta once shared in an interview, "I wanted her to be a woman of substance," and Margaret truly became that. She transformed into a decorated officer, a highly skilled head nurse, and one of the few characters to openly question the horrors of war while still completing her work with unwavering precision. Interestingly, while many male actors left, MASH Loretta stayed and continued to portray Margaret throughout all 11 seasons of the show. She was one of only 4 actors to appear in both the first and final episodes of MASH, a remarkable feat not achieved by many. While other female characters, such as Lieutenant Ginger Bayless and Nurse Cutler, came and went, Margaret remained growing stronger with each season. She was not just a prominent character, but also an integral part of the show's evolution, helping maintain the balance and depth of the series as everything else around her changed. In a show where war stripped the characters down to their core, forcing them to face deep challenges and emotional scars, Margaret stood strong and maintained her resilience. She not only confronted the harshness of war, but also had to overcome personal and societal obstacles, particularly as a woman in a predominantly male world. Thanks to Loretta's persistence and talent, the only woman featured in the opening credits, MASH ensured that female characters also had a significant role, not leaving the burden to the men alone and creating a powerful, emotionally rich image of women in wartime. Thank you for watching the video. We've explored many interesting facts about the actors in MASH, but did we miss any familiar faces? Leave a comment with a 1 if you relate to these stars or a 0 if you have a different opinion. Don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments below. Give this video a like if you found it interesting and hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any more exciting stories. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.